better. Welcome all of you to our early meeting of the Belgian-Luxembourg Chamber of Commerce in Russia and for Russia and Belarus. We choose today the topic of logistics because, as we discussed it yesterday with Stefan, especially the logistics, I think it's practically the last links between Russia and Belgium and Luxembourg for the moment, by which the medicines, the pharmaceutical products, the machinery, the food products arriving to Russia and from Russia. And it's important to maintain it and to develop. We choose three topics today of discussion. One about the compliance with the dual use legislation. Second, on the way of digitalization of Russian customs, and of course about how to deliver your goods without security, without pay too much money for insurance, and to be sure that your customer receive at time what he is awaiting. And I pass the floor first to Stefan van Doorslaer, the chairman of the board of the Belgian-Luxembourg Chamber of Commerce in Brussels. And please, yes. Stefan, my friend.
Hi. Good morning, everybody, especially for the one who's sitting in Belgium. A very good morning. See a lot of familiar faces on both sides. And I think for today's session, last week I was attending a webinar on e-commerce in Russia and how to fulfill e-commerce in Russia. And it was very popular and very active. And I think this is a bit linked to that, but okay, if you need to send your goods out of Europe, Belgium to Russia, what about customs? What about security of your goods? I think it's a very nice topic, and I see the number of people attending. It's also seems to be popular, and I just want to thank the speakers, because I think it's nice to have the Belgian representative of customs in Moscow, but also the Russian representative in Belgium who are speaking today. It's also showing that we are more and more united as a chamber of commerce, because I'm chairman of the Chamber of Commerce based in Belgium. Oleg is the director of the chairman based in the chamber, in Russia, but we are combining our events online. It's much more easy, and also our cooperation is increased and enhanced, and I think that's the way to do it. And also I would like to thank AHLERS from AHLERS as a speaker on how to make sure that if you order something, that the goods will arrive and not an empty truck, but a full truck. That's all for my introduction, because I think you're not here for me or Oleg, you're here for the speaker. So I think, Emmanuel, you are the first one who's going to give some insight. Okay, I'm pleased to give the floor to you.
Thank you. Yeah, just please keep your microphone muted during the presentation to avoid interference, please. I will share the screen. Share. It works? Yes, I think.
It works. That's perfect. Just wait a few seconds. Okay. So we can start, right? So, dear participants, I would like to give you this morning a small introduction to EU dual-use export control. It's going to be very fast, so brace yourself. I try to keep it as clear as possible. Next slide. Oleg, next slide, please. Thank you. So let's start with basic notions. Next slide. So what is the EU export control? It can be defined as a set of legal instruments governing how items, technologies, materials are physically or electronically exported to foreign countries, bodies, entities, and persons. It's a part of the Common Foreign and Security Policy, the CFSP, and it aims to contribute to international peace and security and to prevent the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction. In the Treaty on the Functioning of the European Union, you have the Common Commercial Policy that encompasses the export policy, and that has to be conducted in the context of the principle and objectives of the Union's external action. Next slide, please. Oleg? Thank you. So the general principles of the Union's external actions, they are listed in Article 21 of the Treaty on European Union. And basically, these are the principles on which the EU itself was built. Next slide. Thank you. The general objectives, they are in paragraph 2 of the same article, and basically there are common policies and actions that are taken in order to, I'm not gonna read it all with you, but to promote human rights, democracy, rule of law, multilateralism, sustainable development, and so forth. I'm gonna let you read them later. Next slide. So I told you that the EU export control was a set of legal instruments, and basically there are several European regulations. The most important one for dual-use items is the 428/2009, but you also have the common position 2008/944 that lists I8 criteria that are important for the export of military items and technologies. And finally, you have sanctions. Next slide. So an introduction on dual use now. Next slide. And I wanted to give you a graphical representation of the dual use goods so that you know where they stand. Actually, dual use goods, they are civilian goods that can be used for both military and civil purposes. And it includes all the goods that can be used to produce nuclear, biological, and chemical weapons and the delivery systems thereof. The most important to know if your goods are dual use or not are the technical specifications. So just try to remember it. Alongside the dual use goods, you have the catch-all provision, catch-all goods. And what does that mean? It aims at all the dual-use items that are not listed. So this is a very important distinction. Keep that in mind, listed and non-listed dual-use goods. Next slide, please.
Oh,
previous one, thank you. So how can you classify your goods? You have at least 3 means of doing that. You can use the technical description of the regulation 428/2009 itself. You have the American Commerce Control List, and you also have the customs code and the correlation table. Why am I speaking about the correlation table? It's because actually within the regulation itself, the dual-use items, they receive a specific code that does not correspond to the customs code. So you need a correlation table to find back the customs code. Next slide. So let's speak a bit about the regulation itself. And 2 elements that are very important to begin with. It gives you a definition of the dual-use items. I gave it to you already, but also activities that are controlled because the regulation imposes authorization requirements, reporting and control measures on defined activities. You have 4 activities that are listed in this regulation: export, transfer, brokering, transit, and the 5th one that is coming from another regulation, meaning import. Next slide, please. Thank you. What is very important, I will not read it with you, but I wanted to show you that all these terms, they receive a specific meaning within the regulation. And for example, export and exporter, they have a definition within the regulation. And you always have, in order to know how to apply it, to discriminate between listed and non-listed dual-use items. Next slide, please. So this brings us to the material scope of the regulation and Article 3. You have 2 paragraphs in this article. Paragraph 1 goes for the export of dual-use items listed in Annex 1 of the regulation. All the dual-use items that are listed are in Annex 1 of the regulation. And paragraph 2 goes for all the export of dual-use items that are not listed. Next slide, please. So what you need to know is that this Annex 1 that contains all the listed dual-use items for the EU is updated annually between October and December through control regimes and conventions. You have all of them listed here. You have the Wassenaar Arrangement, the MTCR, the Nuclear Suppliers Group, the Chemical Weapons Convention, the Australia Group, and they feed the Annex 1. And you also have on this slide a list of all the annexes and what they stand for. Next slide, please. So when we speak about listed dual-use items, I told you that they receive a specific code within the regulation. And I wanted to break it down with you so that we know what lies behind. It consists in a system, a classification system with 5 alphanumeric characters. And the first one is for the category of dual use. You have 10 categories for dual use from 0 to 9. You have the second character, that is a letter that stands for the subcategory. You have 5 subcategories. The third one is a digit that goes for the regime, what we have just seen was an arrangement, MTCR, Australia Group, and so forth. And the last 2 digits for the technical specifications. I gave you an example of code for liquid propellant tanks, and you can put it in the correlation table and you'll find immediately the customs code. Next slide, please. So I told you there were also non-listed dual-use items. And for these items, you have 2 articles that are very important in the regulation, and these are Article 4 and 8. I tried to give you a simplified version of Article 4 because it can be a bit difficult to read. What you need to know is that you have the 3 first paragraphs that are very important. They aim different situations. The first one are the items that can be used in connection with chemical, biological, or nuclear weapons and the missiles capable of delivering such weapons. The second is for the items intended for a military end use if the purchasing country or the country of destination is subject to an arms embargo. Next slide, please. The third one is for the items that can be used as part of components of military items that have been exported without authorization or in violation thereof. And in these 3 paragraphs, the exporter is informed by the member state that the items can be used for such purposes. But it goes both ways. If you have a look at paragraph 4, if as exporter you are aware that the items can be intended for any use listed in these 3 paragraphs, you have the obligation to inform the member state. Next slide, please. So I told you there's another article important, it's Article 8, and it provides that a member state may prohibit or impose an authorization requirement for non-listed dual-use items for reasons of public security and human rights considerations. And you'll see that there's a new regulation coming and human rights are increasingly important. Next slide, please. Slide before, thank you. So I'm not going to go through all these authorizations, but I wanted you to know that there are 4 types of export authorizations, and you have the main characteristics listed on this slide. We can talk about it later. Next slide, please. So next slide. There's going to be a recast of the EU legal framework. In other words, there's a new regulation coming. And why is that? It's because the text of 2009 was not modern enough. And as the European Commission put it itself, the current system is not fully geared up to keep up with today's evolving and new security risks, rapid technological and scientific developments. So I gave you a graphic representation of the legislative process to show you where we stand. You have to know that this is a legislative priority for 2021 for the 3 EU institutions concerned, and you have hyperlink to the text of the project. Next slide, please. So I tried to identify some important changes in the wake of the new text, and the first one is that the cyber surveillance items have been added as dual-use items in the new text. You have also an expansion of the catch-all provision. I told you that human rights were becoming increasingly important. And in fact, if non-listed dual-use items are exported and they can be used in connection with internal repression or violation of human rights, then both the member state and the exporter have to know about it. And the exporter can know about it through due diligence and internal compliance system. The third change would be the transmissible application of national measures. I told you that under Article 8, a member state can take national measures for public security and human rights reasons. The novelty here is that the other member states will be able to use it. Next slide, please. So the fourth change is that there are new obligations in terms of due diligence and compliance for exporters. And this is very important. Why? Because there's a shift of the responsibility on the exporters. They are becoming a key component of the control system, and they have to have an internal compliance system. I invite you to read the Commission recommendations. You have an hyperlink on the right side of the slide, and you'll see what the Commission intends the exporters to have. And the last thing is that there will be a new controlled activity, the technical assistance. Next slide, please. So to finish with, I wanted to speak about sanctions or restrictive measures. This is the same. You can use the two terms indifferently. And what I wanted you to know is that within the CFSP, the EU will implement sanctions that are imposed by the UN, by the OSCE, or the EU Council to target governments, entities, group, organizations, or individuals. And they all aim to bring about a change in the policy or the activity of the target. So you have 4 types of sanctions: arms embargo, admission restrictions, asset freezes, restrictions on import and exports. The 2 first are implemented at the national level and the 2 last ones at the EU level. This is very important to know that they apply only when there is a link with EU. EU is against extraterritorial application of law and sanctions in particular. So these are the cases listed on this slide when it will apply. And you have a very useful link to a very useful tool that is the EU Sanctions Map. And basically that's a list per country of sanctions. So you have an hyperlink to the website of the Sanctions Map, and on the small icons beside it, you have an hyperlink to a video on how to use that website. Next slide, please. So the sanctions, I told you, they can target individuals, companies, and so forth. They do not always include dual-use items, but they are always taken into account by the competent authorities when they have to decide whether or not to grant an authorization. And that is what is foreseen in Article 12, paragraph 1 of the regulation. So you have to know that when the authority have to assess whether or not granting an authorization, they have to take into account several risks, political proliferation, and so forth. And the authorities need to have sufficient information about the strategic goods and the end user. Therefore, the end user certification is very important. And for the exporters, you need to know your customers and have appropriate due diligence. An example of restrictive measures against Russia is given on that slide. You have an hyperlink to a full infography about it. Next slide. So I wanted to finish this presentation with some important questions that you have to ask yourself for a strategic goods expert. And there are 3 blocks. The first one is, what am I exporting? Are these listed dual-use items? Are these strategic goods? Can they be used for military purposes? This is the first block. Second block would be, what is the country of destination? You can use the sanction map to know if it is targeted by restrictive measures. Is the country of purchase the country of destination? Is there a diversion risk? And the last block would be, who is the consignee? Is the consignee the end user? Is it targeted by restrictive measures? What is the end use for my items? And these are very important questions for you, I think. My message would be that it's not impossible to do business with dual-use items. It's absolutely feasible, but you always have to bear in mind the legal framework. And that's the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Emmanuel. Brilliant presentation. I think very good description of all the risks from the European Union and European countries' legislation. And I would like to pass the floor to Dmitry Subachev, the representative of Russian customs in Belgium. I believe he is connected. I just would like to remind, please keep your microphone muted during the presentation, because I was so busy to mute the microphone of participant that I miss to change the slides. Dmitry, where are you?
Good morning. Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me.
We can hear you, but yes, and we see you.
And you might see me as well. Camera is on. Thank you, Oleg, and good morning to everyone. I believe that it's morning everywhere now. And thanks to Emmanuel for indeed brilliant presentation. I think that with many of you, we have already participated in various meetings under the auspices of the chambers. I just wanted to make my presentation this time in a format of a brief report, not providing you with the slides as I usually do. Just because of the topic, I felt that the information that I have from my headquarters is quite enough to cover this item, and I just will add a short comment to a chat if we have a chat box in the end of the presentation, just for information of participants, if they want to go on the website of the company that is covering the application of navigation electronic seals used in Russian customs. So as you know, my topic is about the navigation electronic seals in Russia and in the Eurasian Economic Union, including ensuring the security of the transportation of high value goods and high tax ratio commodities. So the history comes to a not very pleasant moment when we had a certain exchange of countermeasures recently, starting from 2014. I believe that we in this format of the meeting don't need to cover those aspects. It is more important to discuss what are the facilitation measures done in the overall environment. So as I said, in 2014 and 2018, there were presidential decrees that imposed certain restrictions on specific goods coming into the customs territory of the Russian Federation. These decrees were complemented by the government regulations that technically covered the implementation of those decrees. However, in 2019, we had a new presidential decree that introduced certain amendments to the preceding ones that allowed the transit of restricted goods, including the sanctioned goods, by road and the rail transport with the use of electronic navigation seals and specific document that accompanies the electronic seal, so-called counterfoil, which is very common for transit transportation. The government regulations that also arrange the implementation of this decree had listed the border checkpoints. There are 20 road checkpoints and 10 rail checkpoints where the seals are applied upon the cross of the border by the transport and removed when the means of transport is leaving the customs territory. Also, these regulations cover the technical requirements for the electronic seals. The government regulation is number 1877 from 2019. And you might know that the navigation environment for application of the electronic seals is covered by the national system GLONASS, which is a very comprehensive satellite system covering a lot of technical areas in Russia and also in the Eurasian Economic Union and even broader. So within the customs union of the Eurasian Economic Union, we don't have the customs control at the border, similar to the European Union, of course. So the Russian Federal Service for Transport Supervision just placed the units in the checkpoints in order to monitor the compliance of the application of the seals when they are transported within the union. We have 12 checkpoints where the transport company has to show up at, during the route to confirm that everything is in order and in accordance with the law. There is a Russian company, it's called a Center for Development of Digital Platforms. It was selected by the Ministry of Transport as an operator to maintain the application and removal of the seals in the checkpoints that are located and defined by the government regulation. In the railroad checkpoints, the Russian rail operator, RZD, acts on behalf of this operator in line with the agreement between these two entities. The customs offices have full access to the system to control and monitor the transportation and the state of the seal. And also they are given with the mobile devices that allow them to scan and also to apply seals back again should they needed to open the means of transport en route for the purposes of inspection or any additional check. We have a lot of mobile units nowadays that are circulating all over the borders and within the country in order to, of course, monitor, control, and intercept the illicit activities. According to the existing rules, the carrier, the transport company, should declare their intention for the transit of the commodities and provide a set of documents that will prove the origin of goods, the sanctioned goods, then can enter for a transit into the customs territory. Also, the company need to provide the information on the nomenclature code of the goods at the level of 10 digits. Basically, the non-compliance to the rules leads to requirement, an obligation of immediate return of goods back if you don't provide the documents and the information of the classification code. And in case, of course, where goods are found by officials that were not declared, it will constitute the administrative offense. Moreover, the presidential decree from 2015 on the application of certain economic measures that are listed in the government regulation 778 and non-compliance with other decrees in this regard will involve mandatory destruction of these goods. On March 24 in 2020, Russian Federation started the pilot project, and we informed the trade community and the customs community as well, including the World Customs Organization, on this pilot project, where we started using the navigation seals with voluntary participation of transport companies. And basing on good results of testing and upon the completion of setting up the technical environment, the navigation seals started being applied as from July 15 on a mandatory basis and on a full scale. Total in 2020, we had about a bit more than 8,500 moves across our territory. 6,900 transport moves were done through the railroad and 1,687 by rail. So yeah, 7,000 by road and almost 2,000 by rail. In general, the project and the further implementation in a comprehensive manner had proven the efficiency and the necessity of using electronic seals, not only in subject transit area, but comprehensively, including all procedures like import, export, transit for any goods, trade within the customs union, and of course to cover the transportation of high value and high tax ratio commodities. In this regard, the Russian customs is currently developing the comprehensive framework with other government agencies to establish a complete environment and the legislative basis for extension of application of electronic seals. And we already agreed with the Ministry of Transport on the text of government regulation that will include checkpoints in the seaports as well, 2 in the east, Vostochny and Vladivostok, and the port of St. Petersburg. Additionally, if you need any more information about the activities that is empowered by the Ministry of Transport to apply the navigation seals, you can visit the official website of this company, the Center for Development of Digital Platforms. I will copy their website in the chat, and if you need more information about
because crime, we have to fight it all together. And this is why we spent a lot of time on this kind of organizations. Voilà. I think this was my last slide, Oleg. Yes. Thank you very much. Spasiba большое.
Thank you very much, Ellen. And I have immediately a question. And how often it happens, this kind of scenario?
Well, there is some kind of seasonality in the criminal activities. What we see is that by the end of the year, close to the holiday season and the Christmas gifts, etc., there is a more active criminal activity. But for the rest, I'll touch wood. We are rather lucky that we do not face many incidents. But again, it is about be prepared. It's not about getting prepared, but it's about be prepared. Know, do your risk analysis both on the routes, on the trucking companies, on the drivers, on your own people. Follow the procedures and communicate. A lot of communication. Sharing is caring.
Okay, and as you show the road between Moscow and St. Petersburg, which is, I think, one of the most, let's say, civilized road in Russia today, and in which part of Russia it's happened mostly?
You can say, the criminal people, they would like to, they want to be active in an area where there is a lot of fish or potential fish. So that means that they are most active between the big cities.
Okay.
There they have the most chances.
I understand. Please, dear participant, please participate if you have questions to our speakers.
Oleg, I have a small question. First of all, you look very interested about this, where it happens. I don't know what your plans are. Should watch out. I have a question for Emmanuel, maybe. First of all, thanks also to the speakers, but you talk about this dual use. Now, when you have a case like this, do you have an idea about timing when you get approvals? Is it something which can go quickly or it takes a lot of time to get an approval? You're muted, Emmanuel, you should unmute.
Okay, thank you, Stefan. It's a question that comes very often, actually. No, they don't have a timing for the authorizations because it depends on the dual-use goods. It depends on the country of destination. It depends if these are listed or non-listed dual-use goods and so forth. So it's always very different, and they cannot give a timing for the authorizations. What I can add is that in Belgium, these are regional competencies. So this is the region that gives the authorization. There's only a small exception for nuclear items, and you have both a federal authorization and a regional one in that case. That's all I can say about that. I'm sorry, Stefan, I cannot give you a timing.
Okay, no problem, thanks.
Dear participant, just unmute yourself if you have a question. If there is,
if I
hello,
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So, if I just can share my screen to show the website that I told you about.
I have to just a second. I have to enable share screen. Yes, now you can, Dmitry, please.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's it. You see? Yeah. So crcp.ru. That's the operator's website where you can find additional information. It's for participants who could be interested in more information about the approved by the government operator of navigation seals in Russia. And by the way, I congratulate Ellen and Emmanuel for very interesting presentations. It's I hope that maybe we can share them afterwards. So we can go through again, and congratulations to AHLERS for the solutions. It's very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you.
2 questions.
And thank you very much, Dimitri, for yours. It was very interesting too.
Can I ask?
Yes, please.
Hello,
Philip.
everybody. Good morning from Belgium now. I have 2 questions for the first speaker, just to go. So it is the regions who make the decisions for the export permission. Do you see a big difference between the 2 regions in interpretation? That's the first question. And for the second speaker, so most of the goods go via Belarus. Can you tell us something more about your relation or the communication with Belarusian customs, your colleagues? Thank you.
So I'm going to start with the question for me. Yeah, actually there are 3 regions. So you have also Brussels, and yes, there are different approaches, especially the Flemish region. It has a specific approach for non-listed dual-use items with 4 categories, but it's rather complicated to explain. So if you want, we can talk about it later, because it would take too much time to explain their system. So we can do it afterwards.
Dmitry, just your microphone, Dmitry, please.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for the question, Philip. As I said, there is a government regulation that notifies the list of checkpoints, and these are external borders of Russian Federation checkpoints. So far, there are 30 cross-border places, and in the end of my update report, I mentioned that we are currently working with the Ministry of Transport and other government agencies to include also the internal border checkpoints where it is necessary, I mean within the Union, where it will be necessary to implement the control. So also we are in close cooperation with Eurasian Economic Commission, because the solution will require an extension of legislation framework and the arrangements, but we believe that it will not take much time for us to extend the framework of this system to the Union as well.
Okay, thank you. And I would like just to say that on 30th of March, we prepare also a webinar on especially doing business in Belarus with Philippe Yerum, present here today, and our also colleague working in Minsk. If you have a more question, please. We still
Oleg.
in time. Yes.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning, Oleg. I've got two questions. First question is about the slides. Do we receive the slides afterwards? Yeah. Okay. That
We will share.
fine.
We will share.
That would be fine. And the second question is to Ellen. I'd like to know how the data, the personal data and the data of the goods are protected during the transport from the European Union towards Russia, because nowadays it's very hard to save personal data as data from the driver, data of the goods in an open database, and for how long it is saved. I mean, you make pictures, you say, you make even a film of the products when you suspect some rudeness. Is there a kind of central database where you store this all those details, or?
First, thank you for your question. First of all, we try to avoid to take pictures of people, but of course, when there is an intrusion, we take pictures of the criminals. The data is shared with the local authorities. In terms of data managing, of course, we follow the rules of the location where the data is, the legal prescription of where the data is located. So a little bit depending on legislation, the number of days that it can be kept. In terms of data analytics, it's about anonymizing the data and taking the lessons learned of it. It's about what can you take out of this data and what analysis you can make out of it. But capturing a lot of data means that we are, by definition, are also working on to anonymize the data and take it from there. Is that an answer to your question?
Yeah. Okay, that's what I want to know. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for question. There is no more question. I believe everybody has wake up already this morning. Yes, please.
Yeah. Hello, Oleg.
Yes.
Yes. Just coming back to the question from Philip. The government regulation that I mentioned, 1877, also includes the portion of the route on the Belarusian and Kazakhstan side. Normally it stemmed from the early stage of the pilot because we used the rail route from China to Europe, and the government regulation covers this initial part. However, the seals are applied in Russia, not at the external border of the Union, but according to the complexity of this route itself, the government regulation also covers some Smolensk region with the Belarusia, and also certain, I think, 4 checkpoints with Kazakhstan, where a certain level of cooperation is already arranged. But it's maybe more to clarify myself, but as I said, basically the project is covering today the external borders of Russia and not yet the external borders of the Union.
Okay, thank you, Dmitry. Then I would like to say big thanks again to Ellen, Dmitry, Emmanuel, to the presentation of today. I would like also to ask to send me your feedback about this event. If you like a morning event and you prefer that it will be maintained in the morning, on the afternoon, do not hesitate, please, to send us your feedback. Thank you very much. Thank you again to all participants. Thank you, Stefan, to stay, to liberate your morning for us. And hope to see you soon all again. Thank you.
Thank you very
Thanks,
much.
Oleg.
Thank
Bye.
you, Oleg.
Bye.
Really. Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.